So hopefully LinkedIn agrees and is notifying people that we are live, and hopefully YouTube will do the same. So welcome everybody to today's podcast. I have to see what episode this is. This is episode 24. Welcome everybody. And today we have special guest Jonathan Tesser and I hope that I pronounced that well. And so we're going to be
Call me John.
John with no
John.
H, just
With no
John. So
faith.
John Tesser, the famous John Tesser, LinkedIn king, and we're going to be talking about awesome versus vanity metrics. But John, tell the good people about you while I open up all the chat windows.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Tesser. I have been working in data and analytics for nearly 20 years, mostly on the data strategy side. So what I call myself is essentially a data translator. I tell stories using data and insights that move the business forward. So that's a combination of research, digital data, all of that fun stuff. I'm not a data scientist. I'm not a data engineer. I'm the guy who talks to people and gets businesses to do things. So that's typically how I introduce myself. So there's always a research component to what I do, which is tied in with the UX research, as well as data analysis. The way that I like to describe myself also is that if it's not data about people, I'm generally not interested in it. For me, the marriage of data and people and behaviors, particularly web analytics and some of the UX data and all that, is very interesting to me. And that's where I like to spend my time, which is analyzing why people do what they do. So my background primarily has been in media and entertainment. I spent many years building up practices at ABC Television, BET, Black Entertainment Television, New York Magazine, and I did a couple startup stints as well in social media and on the ad tech side. Currently, you can see I've had about 8 different careers. My current career is VP of Research and Insights at the NYC Tourism Board. We are called NYC and Company for those who are unfamiliar. And this is kind of the culmination of everything that I've done. It's really awesome. I do survey work, I do social media work, I look at tourism numbers, I look at how different types of Italian tourists that come, that's versus Chinese versus Brazilians. So it's really fun and dynamic, and I love what I do. That was a really long introduction. Was that okay, Debbie? Cool.
That was great. It only takes me about 40 seconds to open chat windows, but I'm glad you gave everybody the full background on you. And we found each other quite accidentally on LinkedIn, and then found we had something strange in common, that we went to the same college right after each other.
And we both majored in music. Don't forget that.
Did you graduate? Did you get a degree in music?
I got a major in music.
Okay, I'm proud of you.
A bachelor's degree in music and psychology.
I have the same thing. Yes, you and everybody else had I had the double major. I was chemistry, but I ended up dropping it when I realized I was not going to be a genetic researcher. You know, Bubby never forgave me. What can I say?
The double, and the Tufts and the music. It's very rare.
Yep.
It's a very rare combo.
I know. So we were like immediate cousins. So I want to ask you, we're talking about awesome versus vanity metrics, and I've also worked in a variety of places. I've worked with startups, and to me, nobody seems to have as many vanity metrics as startups. They seem to be counting some of the strangest things. And then, by the way, for those watching live, this is unscripted. We're riffing. We're happy to take your questions and your comments. So I'm monitoring the chat rooms if you have something to add. Jonathan, can you tell us about some startup metrics and maybe why these people are focused on what you and I might think are the wrong things?
Well, when you mean startup metrics, are you talking about like metrics, how startups like for themselves, how they measure themselves?
Usually I see it around the customer metrics, like, our customers did this, and like they've wangled everything every which way to try to prove to investors or somebody that this must be good.
Yeah, so actually it's a really great question, Debbie. The problem that startups have is the lack of data, really. I mean, they have to define their market and their customer segments without anybody actually using a product. So yeah, they actually a lot of times have to make stuff up. in order to convince people that they're worthy. The other problem with startups is that they don't have the John Tessers and the Debbies of the world working for them. And what I mean by that is they are not data savvy. They're not data literate. So they may be savvy in whatever it is that they're trying to sell, right? And they may be savvy business people, but they don't know how to look at the right metrics and come up with what's actually worthy of doing. I think what's most interesting, and Debbie, I'd love to get your thoughts on this since we are riffing, is the UX metrics that they choose to use. Basically, because they're bootstrapping, how are they measuring how effective their product is, considering that, again, they don't have the Debbies and the Johns of the world looking at the data to say, yeah, this is what matters and this is what doesn't.
When I was doing the startup thing in San Francisco, both having one and working with ones, I found that the two things that I kept hearing over and over from everywhere, as if they were the only things that mattered, were traction and adoption. And they were both meant to be measures of like how many people were coming on board. So say you released something, maybe you released a minimum viable product or some sort of beta version of something. And then you had to start to show the investors or at the pitch competitions you were doing that we've got people signing up for this. We have traction and adoption, as in like we've managed to bring people in and we've managed to keep some of them. But I'm thinking before we go too deep, for people who haven't heard this term before, can you give a definition of vanity metrics?
Sure. So a vanity metric, I think let's talk about some of them in specifics, right? So I'm going to use social media, for example. A vanity metric's a metric that sounds nice, but it doesn't actually do anything for the business, right? So when you say like adoption, okay, so let's talk about adoption for a second for a startup. I think that can be a vanity metric or it can be a real metric. If your definition of adoption is somebody used the product once, great, you did great, right? You got 95% adoption. If you're measuring it the real way, and I think now we're getting to the core of what this conversation is supposed to be, right? If you really want to measure adoption and you're serious about taking your business to the next level, right? You're not just like, oh, okay, metrics are cool. Yeah, I like data. But if you're really serious about it, then you're going to look at adoption as, okay, what percentage of the people are logging in every day? What percentage are logging in every week? What percentage of those people who are logging in every day and every week continue to log in for 2 months, right? You're very specific that adoption really means what you're saying it means. It's not just a vanity metric, which is adoption, use the product once, right? You really have to think about what it means for your business and be serious about it.
That's a great point. In that with the startups that I used to see, because I used to go to all these pitch competitions and everybody would talk about their stuff. And it just seemed like people could say like, hey, we've had 150 people sign up, but you're dying to ask like, how many of them used it more than once and how many of them aren't your mom?
Yeah, exactly. And then let's talk about, I think that's also a great example is, okay, so you got 150 people to sign up. That's a vanity metric, actually, because what you're not looking at is how expensive was it to sign those 150 people up, right? Did you have to spend $500 per customer in order to make that work? Or did you get them all to sign up within 10 minutes and they weren't your mom, right? When you're talking about those kind of things, you want to say, okay, great. So I got these people to sign up. It's not costing me this much, and it's helping my business, right? Everything requires, and Debbie, I think this is really let's not beat around the bush on this one. Everything requires thinking.
Hey, tell me more.
Oh, absolutely. It requires this critical thought of when I talk about this metric, right? I'm not just throwing it out there for PR people to say, "Oh, that sounds great. Let's go talk about it." Right? That's what PR vanity metrics. I'm sorry, PR people. I hate to say it.
I know. I'm always saying sorry, marketing, but
I mean, look, PR people are measured by vanity metrics, so I give them a break on it, right? They have to go out there and say we got 150 downloads and like not too much skepticism around it. But if you're on the business side, right, and you're not skeptical or cynical or pushing these metrics further, you're literally killing your business. I don't think I'm exaggerating.
Because your focus is in the wrong place.
Because you aren't thinking about what's actually going to move your business in the direction that it needs to move. And if you're not thinking about that, then your business is going to die. I mean, it's just the reality is that if you're not data driven in the right way and you're not looking at the right things, how can you possibly succeed as a business?
I can't, I'm not sure I'm going to disagree with anything you say, but I certainly can't disagree with that. So, one thing that I always see people battling over is whether or not NPS has value.
Oh
And
God.
before I give you my thought on that, tell us, because I don't know if you saw on LinkedIn, but the other day I got an NPS survey from a company and I gave them a 1. And then of course I had the open text box and it was, tell us
Yeah.
about whatever. And I said, look, hypothetically, I shouldn't have to tell you about whatever. If you had read any of my last support tickets, they were all like, and I'm leaving because my problems were deemed unsolvable. So I said, well, then I'm just going to leave. All of a sudden, I have this retention sales guy emailing me, tell me how you used our product. Tell me what was going wrong for you. And I said, too little, too late. If you cared about that, you would set up triggers like this person used the word cancel in a support ticket. Like we could be smarter about these things. So before I talk about the magical triggers I wish people would set up,
Yes.
let's talk about NPS. Is
NPS
it
is a really good
valuable?
one. No, it's not. Because of exactly, I mean, you already answered the question, right? You
Okay.
answered it yourself. The only value that NPS has is in the substance behind the NPS. And how are you to say that somebody's 6, right? They rate something a 6, and then they rave about it, and they say, "I love this product. I give most products a 2," versus somebody who gives it a 10 and says, "Yeah, it's fine," right? They just filled the survey out. How do you know? I mean, the real value in an NPS is exactly what you're getting at. It's the experience of it. It's not the score. I think NPS is an extreme vanity metric. I think it's used by product people. It's used by website people to say, we increased our, like I'm doing my robot dance, right? We increased our NPS from 4 to 5 this month and people like us. And then they're going to send us, okay, bullshit. I mean, a lot of those simple metrics just don't work for me. Do you need more explanation, or I think I
No,
think I made
no, that
myself
was
very
me. That was
clear.
me checking for those watching the video. That was me checking the box of not suitable for children. Once
Oh,
Jonathan
because I
says
said
bullshit,
bullshit.
it's
It's
okay.
over.
Google now makes you do that for YouTube. That's fine. Happy to check that box. Um, so I had someone tell me, and I thought this was a good idea, that if you're gonna do NPS, use it as I don't think baseline's the right word, but use it as the fountain from which we would then spin up more qualitative research. That just asking people the number, thank you. Is this, I don't know what I'm doing. Just
that's like my, oh my god, you got it right. I'm gonna
yeah.
do my
Well, good.
dances with
This
my
was a
thumbs.
this was a marketing expert that I interviewed for my Delta CX book, and she said, "Look,
Uh,
NPS can be meaningless or meaningful, but if you use it to spin up qualitative research to learn why," and she gives an example in my book of how they sent NPS to 2 target audiences, and one was like new to their product, one wasn't new to their product. The new to the product
mm,
people generally gave like a 3, and the
yeah.
not new to the product were giving like 8. So then they spun
Yes.
up research on, okay, why is this group unhappy or struggling?
Okay.
And then why is this group doing well? So
I want to
my thought,
riff off of this for a
go,
second. Sorry
go.
to
I'm
interrupt,
I'm I'm
Debbie.
setting
You
you
just
up and
got
I'm
me
throwing the
really, you
ball.
totally did, because I just got really excited. The way to use NPS is exactly that. If there's a way for you to plug in an NPS, right, into a web analytics platform, for instance, satisfaction with the user experience, and then you watch how people go around the site, or what are their bounce rates or anything like that. Now you have really interesting data around usage of a website, based on what people think of you. I think so. It's the qualitative, but there is a quantitative component that you could potentially do, based on interest. Just riffing off of what you're saying, but it's actually a really exciting use of NPS. But let's get back to the original conversation. How is NPS used most of the time? If you think
It's
about
on
it,
a PowerPoint slide
It's
saying
vanity
we're
metric.
6.7.
It's vanity metric. Vanity metric, guys, means nothing.
Right.
Saying you have an NPS of 6.7 and you put that to the board is just to get a bunch of like really old, important people go, yeah, 6.7, that sounds great. Yeah, right?
My question would be, what are you doing about that? Where's the action?
Right. So a vanity metric specifically has no action to take. That's exactly right. I can't hear you.
I keep muting because I'm coughing my head off.
Oh, okay. Coughs are good.
Sorry.
Productive.
Yeah. I don't have coronavirus as far as I know, but I did have a cold 2 weeks ago, and I'm that short cold, long cough person. So I apologize. I'll be muting a lot. I have no metrics around that. So whenever I get these, so my thought was, and I also put this into my book, was that I think a lot of these metrics, I should say before that other thing, there was the same person I interviewed. She also talked about how there are metrics that are so left over from olden times that we think they're meaningful, and they're not meaningful. And one example she gave was like time on page. And she basically said, if you're not following Melinda Byerly, you want to know Melinda Byerly, a little hard to spell, Byerley. Melinda Byerly.
Melinda knows what she's talking about.
Great. Oh yeah, she does. Yeah. Great marketing expert. Super
Absolutely.
lady. And she was saying how if you are a content provider, then maybe you care about time on page because you want people to see ads, or you want them to see a certain amount of content. But maybe if you're e-commerce or you're a very task-based website, then the idea that people spent a lot of time on a page might mean that, as I like to say, they met the 4 horsemen of bad UX, registered trademark, frustration, confusion, disappointment, and distraction.
Let's throw another one out there. So this is brilliant, by the way. And guys, let's talk about methodology for 2 seconds, okay? I actually put this out today on a post on LinkedIn, and I didn't introduce myself through LinkedIn because that's just a different persona. This is John Tesser, the actual working research person. But I did put a post out on LinkedIn around methodology, and let's talk about methodology when it comes to some of these vanity metrics, right? You're going to love this story. This is a really good one. So the ultimate vanity metric in the world of websites is page views. So let's talk about page views for a second, because this was a really great one. So my first real web analytics job was with ABC Television, and I worked for the local broadcast. And there were no defined metrics at this time. This was 2008, and so we defined page views as a great metric. Well, hear me out for a second. Do you know that the number one thing that people go to local TV websites for? Take a guess. What is local TV known for?
Do you mean like why you're going to WPIX 11 or something?
That's right. Why would you go to WPIX 11?
Why is there an ambulance siren outside of my window?
That, and the other thing is weather.
Okay.
Everyone goes to the local weather station for weather. And so as part of that weather, you have radar. You're going to love this one. So the way the radar worked back in 2008 is every time the radar changed, guess what? Another page view got counted.
Oh, right, because it refreshes.
That's right.
It wasn't like super. Yeah, the page refreshed.
So the page refreshed. So we would go out every month, and Houston obviously gets a lot of big storms, so people go to the site, and we would get 11 million page views.
We're so successful.
Goodness. We're doing great.
People love us.
Right? And so again, page view, if you don't know the methodology behind that, you could say 11 million. Whoa, that's amazing. But let's ask that question again. How is this page view in the context of vanity versus productive, right? Okay, so how is knowing that 11 million page views, and you had 3 million last month when there was no storm, the only thing you're proving is that people come to your site when there's a storm. You're not moving the business in any way. So yeah, time on site is another amazing metric. Do you actually know how websites record time on site, Debbie?
Wow.
This is a fun methodology question.
Okay, I'm not going to pretend I do. Go ahead, you tell me.
So, and I love this Melinda person because I'm sure she knows this. So this hasn't changed since. This is a legacy metric. This time on site. So the way Omniture Google Analytics records time on site, guess what? You have to go from one page that you land on, and you actually have to go to another page. and it records the time in between you going to one page and you going to another page, and it says that's the time you spent on the site. Now, think about that as a problem, right? If you're going from one page to another page, you necessarily had to have gone to at least 2 pages on the site. First of all, they don't know how long you're actually spending on the site.
Okay. So you talked briefly about the tools that let you associate the NPS with the actual actions on the site, and I think those are tools like 4C, maybe Full Story, maybe Hotjar on the cheap side. And I've used those, and so just in case the audience isn't familiar with them, these are tools that you can set up on your site to, based on whatever is the privacy laws where you live, record people's screens as they move around your site, and and then you can also give them a mini survey, and you can then search later, like, show me everyone who said navigation was 6 or lower, and let me watch their session and see what went wrong. And so for people who aren't familiar with the types of tools we're talking about, you probably want to, depending upon your budget, you're taking a look at 4C, Full Story, and Hotjar. Can you think of any other tools that are in that bucket?
I am not the expert on the NPS tools and the user experience tools. Yeah. But
No,
I know
problem.
4C. They've come to. I've worked with 4C, or they've tried to sell me before in my old media jobs.
Yeah, that's some expensive stuff, but I did see it on one project I worked on, and it's the kind of thing, it's like worse than a horror movie, because you're looking at someone who already said, like, this was bad, this was bad, this was bad. Then you go and watch their session. Now, you can't see them, you can't hear them, so it is technically anonymous, and usually it'll anonymize anything they type on the screen, which is also nice. But I remember watching one once where the person wanted to navigate the site, but the site navigation was bad, and I won't go into why. And they literally did this with their mouse. You're just watching them do, like, they were their own spinner. and you're going, no, like in slow motion. So, and then the question is, then what's the action? What did we do about that? We learned that the navigation was difficult. What did we do about it? And so I try to remind people, I think, that some metrics can be made into more meaningful things if we take action. But as you said, if you just show up to a meeting and your slide says, congratulations, these are our numbers, then that's part of where this falls apart, I think.
Right. And it comes down. So I don't want to get too deep or too far off on this, but the only way to fight the vanity metric bug is to make sure that you have senior staff who's really serious about using data to inform the business. And that's, if you don't, trust me, the vanity metric game is the only game in town. Right? Because they're gonna prove their value. They're gonna look at the analytics and they're gonna say, I got to keep my job, right? And the only way I'm gonna keep my job is if the metrics look good. Well, I'm gonna go to vanity metrics because they're always gonna make me look good. I can spin them anyway. If there's not somebody who's like, no, you know what? Screw you. You can't show me these vanity metrics. They mean nothing. What are you doing to make the business better? Then you're basically dead out of water as an analyst. I've been in very, very great metric driven companies like New York Magazine. Oh my goodness. Unbelievable sense of the right KPIs, the right way to look at things. Let's talk about some good metrics instead of vanity. You want to do that for a second?
Yeah, sure. And also remind people that for those of us watching live, we are live, even though it's usually about a minute delay. So please post your comments to the page, or both in YouTube and LinkedIn. You can post your comments, and don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. You can go to deltacx.tv. That'll take you right to our YouTube channel. Please subscribe there, because they are much better at telling you that I'm live than LinkedIn is. So Jonathan, yes, please tell us, what are some good metrics?
I would love to. So New York Magazine, like I said, was a really incredible metric-driven organization on digital. And if you guys go to New York Magazine, you'll see it's reflected in the quality of the user experience and how the site basically runs in general. I built the foundation there. Oh my God, I'm so amazing. I built the foundation. Sorry, I needed to, that sounded so obnoxious, but I did. And so let's talk about some real metrics. So one of the great ways to measure marketing, if we have any marketing folks here, was this conjoint analysis idea. If you came in, right, we spent some money to get people from the Huffington Post to come over to New York Magazine in January. How many of those people that we got coming from the Huffington Post in January came back on their own volition or through some natural search, right, back to New York Magazine the next month? Think about how that's a good metric, right? They didn't come back because they were on Huffington Post and we targeted them again on Huffington Post, right? Good metrics take a lot of thinking, because that could have easily turned into a vanity metric. Oh, we got 80% retention rate from Huffington Post. Well, no, you actually hit them on January with some paid dollars. You hit them on February with some more paid dollars. No, we are saying the only way that this is good is, wow, okay, cool. I liked the New York Magazine content so much. It resonated so much with me that I came back through some other source that wasn't Huffington Post in a month. Think about how valuable that is, right? You can then compare what happened on Huffington Post to all of the other different marketing mediums and say, aha, we're getting more loyal customers, which everybody wants, right? It's the 80-20 rule. We all know about that. Getting more loyal customers to come back at a given time because they love us, and that means we're reaching the right people, not a vanity metric. Absolutely critical to the business, right? So this kind of stuff might be like standard now. I don't know if it is.
I never assume anything, especially as some companies, you talked before about having a more senior person with experience coming in to design some of these programs. And we know not every company is starting to build their practice with a senior person. They're looking for, I've seen crazy job ads that are like, looking for someone right out of journalism school who we can pay 3 cents.
3 cents, huh? They can buy that water that you showed me at the beginning.
That's this, of course. Not sponsored. This is just my local spring water.
Well, you said it so beautifully, Debbie. I thought it sounded sponsored.
It is. I don't have a sponsor. I just have a radio voice.
You have a fantastic radio voice. All right, we're getting completely off topic. But
awesome metrics. I mean, your point Tell me exactly more.
Right. Okay, awesome metrics. Let's think. Yeah, so remember how I said, so bounce rate. Let's talk about, this is a really good one, because I want to get back to Melinda's point.
Okay.
You are a content site, and we just talked about how time on site could be a bullshit metric. Well, guess what? It is not always a vanity metric. Okay. Time on site can be a phenomenal metric if you're a content shop and you want to say to an advertiser, hey, on average, we're getting about 2.5 minutes of reading time on our articles. That means people are engaged. It's not a bullshit metric, because you're actually comparing all of the different articles that you're writing and you're saying these are the most engaging with the audience. Now, let's talk about this for a second, because vanity metrics and awesome metrics are tied into methodology. There's a company called Chartbeat out there. Didn't get paid to mention Chartbeat, but Chartbeat pings the site every 5 seconds. Chartbeat was designed with journalism and content sites in mind to ping the site, right, every 5 seconds, so you have an accurate measure of time. They also do scroll rate, right, so you know how much people have scrolled, and they tell you whether people finished an article or not. These, in the world of content, are core to your business, because it's obvious why, right? These are metrics that are needed in order to say to advertisers, people enjoy our content in a world of like content farms and shitty content. Now you can prove, look, we have great content. We're the Atlantic, right? That article, it got 1 million visitors, but it was a 25-minute article, and wow, were people engaged. Most people finished it. You can go out and sell that and say, yeah, we may not have the biggest numbers. We may not be the New York Post, but wow, people are engaged and we're proving it to you. So it's interesting. You can really take this idea of a vanity metric, which is time on site, and turn it into something that's actually very important and critical to the business, depending on the way that you're using it and depending on the methodology that's being used.
Someone asked a question in the chat room, and I'm not sure what this person means. I'm just going to read it, and hopefully it will resonate with you, and you'll have an answer. Michaela asks, can you expand on you? So I think there's a couple of words missing here. You used conjoint analysis in that example. Can you expand on
that? So conjoint analysis is it's essentially an analysis where you take a specific point in time and you look at it. You look at the data over time, right? I can't really explain more than that without actually sitting down with Michaela and showing her how you do it. But essentially, like 100% of the people came in February, right? And then, of those 100% that came in February, 60% returned in March, 40% returned in April, 30% returned in June, right? And you just start comparing the different months, but you add on this layer of, you exclude people who came from, that original site or that original marketing. I'm assuming that at this point, and hopefully Michaela has some sort of response to this, but I'm assuming that at this point, this is fairly standard marketing analysis. Back when I did it in 2010, this was considered innovative and crazy, and I won awards. I was called Marketer of the Month by Adobe because I came up with this conjoint analysis thing, and now it's like so simple. But hopefully that explains it. It's really just taking one set and seeing how it performs over a period of time.
Okay, that made sense to me, and we'll see if Michaela has a follow-up question. If you do, please type it in the chat.
Good question, though.
Eye on it. I'm keeping my eye on it, and I know you're about a minute or so delayed. YouTube is less delayed than LinkedIn, which is also why I suggest people head there. So thinking more about awesome metrics. I've done a lot of work in retail, and the metrics are always around what did people spend, how much did they spend, how
average order rate,
all the average order value and things like that. And I want to tell you about a moment in time where a metric brought us to a crossroads and nobody could figure out what to do. And I'm going to just tell you a little about it, and I'm curious what you would have done. So the question
challenge.
was,
I'm on an interview.
I'm just curious. Well, it happened. So this company had data on, of course, what percent of its app users were on iOS, what percent of its app users were on Android. And their Android number looked kind of low. I think it was maybe 30% Android, 70% iPhone, or something like that.
Okay.
And they had never gone and built a native Android app. They had always somehow built an iPhone app and just kind of ported it over to Android. So it wasn't originally designed with a lot of Android native things. It looked kind of like an iPhone app that somebody built for Android. And so it was a little bit of a chicken egg question. And so they had these metrics that said that we don't have that many Android users. It's this percentage that's noticeably lower than iPhone. But we're finding that Android users shop more, spend more often, and they couldn't figure out, should we invest in making something better for Android users?
Okay, so what's the question?
So the question is, like, in a sense, which of those metrics, based on the little I've told you, and you weren't there.
I'm going into cynical. I'm going into cynical analyst mode.
Go ahead.
Because so let's talk about that. So you may have had so were there more Android users than iPhone or less?
No, so there were 30% of users were Android, 70% were iPhone. Now, one of the things I said was, maybe we have such few Android users because our app isn't great.
Thank you. That's exactly what I just said.
That's what you would have said.
So the number one place. So this is where this is an interview, and I love it. I'm going to prove my chops here, guys. I know there's so many people who think I'm a fake analytics person on LinkedIn. Did you know this, Debbie?
I didn't know this.
They don't think that I know how to do. They don't think I know how to do analytics.
I'm not stalking your haters, just so you know. I don't follow your haters.
The haters think because I don't code, I don't know how to do analytics. So I'm going to prove to them wrong right now. So here's what I think is happening with Android users, right? First of all, yes, the base might be low, right? Secondly, who knows if they're using tablets or phones? So they may be more inclined to use something, or I don't know, maybe there's somehow on a desktop. I'm not sure. We don't know about device, so that didn't come into
I think
play
this was
here.
just phone related. This was just so it wasn't tablet. This was just for
Okay.
the people using our phone app. 30% of our phone app users are on Android. 70% of our phone app users are on iPhone. And the conclusion was we should just keep reinvesting in iPhone and semi-ignoring Android because we just don't seem to have as many users.
No, it's just, I mean, you have to ask all the questions and dig beneath the surface. Where are the Android users coming? Maybe they're all coming from Abu Dhabi and they have millions of dollars to spend. And your experience was really bad, but because they're from Abu Dhabi and they have millions of dollars to spend, they're spending it, right? You don't know. You have to dig. You have to get at the why. Throwing out the metric without the why is useless. You're not going to be able to answer the question whether you need to build a new app, whether you figure out all of these things, right? Maybe the Android users like are so used to the experience and they're so loyal to whatever the site is, right? Because there's so few of them that they're skewing the metrics. We don't know that. Maybe most of the users of iOS are new, and that's why they're not spending as much. You know, there's a series of about 20 questions that you need to ask as a website person before you can even say should we invest or not. And if you're not getting to that why, all of this is vanity metrics. Okay, 30%, okay, 70%. It doesn't matter. It has to be answered with what's going on under the surface that's causing this, and then you can decide whether it's worth investing or not.
Right. And I called for something like that. And I also want you to know that this was a room full of iPhone users. And there had to be 10 people in the room, and I'm the only Android user. This had to be a room of 10 or 12 iPhone users and me. And they also announced that in general, Android people just don't have as much money. And they don't have as much they're because Android phones are cheaper, and so these are the type of people who just don't have as much money as iPhone users. And I was like, dude, my phone costs what yours cost. I have the flagship Samsung latest $1,000 phone. Like, why are we playing that game now?
Yeah, I mean, this is an entirely separate conversation that we could spend an hour riffing on. But people non-data people who make assumptions in meetings, that kills things.
Yeah, obviously that was not a UX person. Obviously, a lot of UX universe is about not having guesses and assumptions and trying to and if we have a guess and assumption, using that to remind ourselves to spin up better research. Michaela's writing back. The term conjoined analysis I'm familiar with is a trade-off approach to understand preferences. I never heard the term used for what you described. We use conjoined analysis for product development, pricing studies, message configuration, and much more. It comes from econometrics and used extensively in market research.
Okay, so maybe I'm not using it the right way. I have no idea.
You're fired.
I'm fired. You're smarter than I am, Michaela. But that's just how I've used it. Look, I'm not going to get into like the specifics of things, right? I'm just using it as a term that that's essentially what I called it. It's what my boss at BET called it.
I'm sorry she heckled you.
That's okay. I got heckled by, somebody who knows a lot more about statistics and data and all that stuff. It doesn't matter to me. It was a useful metric, and the point is that it helped the business, whatever you call it. I'm going to call it the John Tesser NY Mag metric, right? It doesn't matter.
I like it.
It's fine. The point is not about the analysis and the statistics behind it. If you want to make up things for that, that's great. My point is it's something that actually measured the business and moved the business in the right way, and I called it a conjoint analysis.
And we still love you.
I love myself, so it's great.
You should.
I do.
Back to our craziness. So yeah, that was just something that I think of. That was a job where all of the data was skewed, and I would have to pay you for the therapy hour if I told you about it. But instead of paying you for the therapy hour, telling you about
let's not do that.
But I heard you don't like to do that. Telling you about a crazy job.
No, I don't like to get paid for therapy.
Telling you about a wacky job I had where all of the data was skewed by all the product managers. Let's go back to something more glorious. So in the world of UX or CX or customer behavior, I know it's hard to say, hey, what are some great metrics? But because it's going to be different by business and by industry. But just if we shot kind of generally at some industries,
I got
what would you
ones
say
for
in general? Yeah, what would you say in general are some good ones to look for?
I'm thinking back to my media days, right, and being on a website. It really all comes down to what you're trying to accomplish. You know, video was, God, this is a tough one to answer, because here's why, Debbie. You stumped me. I've been pretty good about just sort of jumping in. The reason that this stumps me is when you're thinking about product and UX and those kind of metrics that are vanity or not, it's so product and it's so project specific, right? So I can think about projects that I've worked on with product, where we designed UX metrics, but it was so specific to the product that it's almost not even worth me talking about, right? It was, like we introduced at BET, we had a new slideshow experience. And we wanted to prove that the slideshow experience was better than the old one. Okay, so we had to look at the individual elements of the slideshow and say, oh, okay, well, this one did, this was an improvement. Like people didn't close it as fast, or people clicked on this icon but they didn't click on this one, and it seemed like they got to this next area. That's why I'm having a hard time answering this question. It really, every single time I do product analytics or I think of user experience analytics to say something's better or not, it's so dependent on what you're trying to get the product to do for the person. So I guess I kind of answered my own question there. I'm not going to talk specific about metrics, but the one piece of advice I would have is, what do you want the person to do? And are they doing more of what you want them to do, or are they doing less of it than what you had before? If they're doing more of what you want them to do, you can claim success. If they're doing less of what you want them to do, you have to go back to the old iteration. If it's some sort of a combination, figure out, where they're doing more of what you want them to do and give them more of that, and then you iterate, right? It's a constant experiment. So that's why I think it's a tough question. The KPIs are dependent on whatever the product is. And it's going to be the same for any sort of site. It's not just media, but like if you design a new product form, right? You want somebody to click on the product form. Okay, you could get more signups, but how do you know how those individual elements of that form cause somebody to sign up for something? So you have to look at all of that stuff. Kind of a roundabout answer, but
Well, I wanted to ask you a different question, and that was either in the job you're in now or other ones, how much of the data and information that you're working with is quantitative and how much of it is qualitative from observational studies or interviews or listening labs?
Yeah, this doesn't have to do with vanity versus, we're switching topics a little bit.
It's
What
a
I
little bit,
do
yeah.
now, no, I'm cool with that. I think it's good. I think we should talk about, we got a little bit of time. So it's really interesting when you work in a job where right now I actually don't have any KPIs, because I'm not working with a website. So what's really interesting is the combination of the qualitative and quantitative data that I work at to understand real business meaning is actually a phenomenally interesting challenge. So let's talk about what I do here for a second. I think maybe some users might be interested. We have the hard data that comes in. We have hotel occupancy for the city. This is all travel and tourism stuff. So I might, if I get too insidery, stop me. But we understand how many, like what percentage of people, what percentage of rooms are filled, right? So that's hotel occupancy. We understand on an average day, how much are they spending at those hotels, right? We're getting all of the flight data in. That's all quantitative data, but we're also using a lot of qualitative measurements around people's identities and what they do in New York City to understand, how do we market better to them? So there's a real full range of what we're doing to try and understand, quote unquote, the health of New York City. Both sides are as important as the other. I'm just going to be real honest with you. The travel and tourism industry is very uncomfortable with this idea of qualitative.
Okay.
They don't like it. They want the hard metrics. The reason being, and again, this is not me insulting the industry, this is just what it is. These are state offices a lot of times, or they're government-run offices, and government-run offices couldn't care less about identity of people and like shades of gray and all
Human
this.
behavior.
That's all bullshit to them, right? So they want the hard metrics. And so a lot of these state-run organizations are like, I need economic impact. I need to know dollars spent and dollars returned. And so the focus on the industry has been to build, what I call build a better horse cart when there's cars out there, right? You make the economic impact models better, or blah blah blah. Instead of, maybe we should look at like why this is happening, or the quality of people that come here, or all of the stuff that you consider to be really important in UX and product. I don't know if I'm getting off on a tangent here, but it's an interesting sort of dilemma that I face in the travel industry.
And we have a question in the chat room. So Jude is asking if you've ever used OKRs, and I'm going to add, and how do you use them?
What is an OKR? What's an OKR?
Objectives and key results.
I have no idea what that is.
They normally go with KPIs. So KPIs are usually the things you're trying to measure, and sometimes OKRs are things that you're trying to measure, but they're not.
I hate formal methodologies, guys. I'm just gonna I'm gonna come out and say no. I don't like being told that I have to fit within a framework. I mean, let me explain how I work with everything. Right, the way it comes down to essentially understanding the business objective, right? Everything comes from what the hell are you trying to accomplish? Okay, great. Do we have something that we can measure from there? Okay, great. Do we have subsets that we're trying to measure underneath that to understand why? I don't use these acronyms, OKR, KPI, blah, blah, blah. I think about it from a strategic standpoint of ultimately at the top, what are we trying to do? And then let's dig down further. Does it make sense?
Absolutely. I'm in your boat. When I started doing the work that I was doing, I didn't know there were all kinds of formalized terms for different things that I was doing. And I got stuck in various places where people used a term that I didn't know. And then they were like, what do you mean you don't know that term? And it's like, well, I didn't know it was called that, but I've been doing it. So which one's more important?
I mean, that's the whole thing, right? So we've gotten two questions now about these terms. The terms don't matter, guys. Nothing matters about a term. It matters, are you making a business better? And do you have the right framework of thinking, critical thinking, that's going to make it better? That's all it comes down to. And using OKR or conjoint or whatever is not important.
Excuse me. Because ultimately you can have OKRs that are garbage and you can have KPIs that are garbage. And so just the idea that you're using these things or you've employed them in your strategy doesn't necessarily mean you've done them right or done them well. So
you're getting another thumb dance, because that's exactly right. You can use these terms like OKRs and KPIs to like virtue signal how smart you are in analytics. It's bullshit. It doesn't matter at all whether if you're using the right terms or not. You're just trying to make people think you sound smart. Debbie and I are not about that. We are about making sure that the experience is perfect in Debbie's case, and in my case, making sure the business is heading in the right direction and they know what it means to head in the right direction. Everything else is secondary.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to admit, I recently turned 48 and I published my book in September, and my book mentions OKRs, and I had to Google them because somebody else had mentioned them, and I wanted to try to write a little bit about them, and I realized I don't even know what this is. But I also don't come necessarily from a marketing side of things, but it was a term that for whatever wacky reason, after, a 25-year career, somehow that term had eluded me and I had to look it up. So I don't pretend to know every single term for everything out there. So, but ultimately you're right. We have to do a lot more critical thinking. And if these things have names, hooray. But ultimately the critical thinking is at the core of all of this. And I feel like that's being done less and less.
It's a problem, and we should have another hour conversation about that, because this focus on like getting the right terminology, doing the right analysis without the focus on the strategic framework is probably the biggest problem that we have in the entire data industry. No one is focusing on the strategy. No one is thinking about the business from the top end. No one is challenging the fact that coming up with the right KPIs to do this might be more difficult than the quote unquote vanity metrics that we've talked about. And I really want people to listen to this podcast, because I'm hoping that people start to think, okay, you know what, he's right. I'm not doing enough of that. I need to move in this direction. And Debbie's right. And, she's thinking about these issues in this way. And we've got to get more people to jump on our bandwagon of the critical thinking and nitpicking almost, that is this the right way to look at things.
So here's what I've been pushing for, and I posted about this the other day on LinkedIn, and it's in my book. And I'm pushing for people to create behavior-based triggers. So for the example I use in my book is last year I was shopping for a cruise, and I had found a heavily discounted cruise on a cruise line that I like. I put the cruise in my cart, and when I went to check out, it didn't accept my payment method. And no matter what I did, I said, I'll pay with PayPal, I'll pay with my MasterCard, I'll pay with my Visa, I'll pay with my American Express. No matter what, I put a hold on it. I won't pay now, I'll pay later. No matter what I did, I couldn't check out. And I started asking myself, there's going to be a meeting. There's going to be a room full of people somewhere who see people who didn't finish their checkout and make up stories about them. Oh, maybe she couldn't afford that cruise. Oh, maybe she changed her mind. Dude, you were like this close to having my money, but your site didn't work. And so my thought was, what if there were behavior-based triggers? What if the website were smart enough to say, wow, this woman just tried to pay twice and neither one went through. We should have like a chat window open up with her and say, are you having trouble checking out, and save that sale, or wow, that person just logged into her account from Firefox, Internet Explorer, Edge, and Chrome. I started logging into all different browsers to try to figure out how to pay for this thing, and it wasn't working.
Yep.
And like, what if there were a behavior trigger? We're seeing same account logging in multiple browsers. Multiple browsers usually means somebody's having trouble with something and they assumed it was a browser incompatibility. I'm calling for, and this is not necessarily about measuring, this is more about capturing a human behavior in the moment where it's kind of working against our strategies or initiatives, where Debbie didn't buy that cruise or whatever the case it was, and rather than making up stories about why Debbie didn't buy the cruise because her credit card wasn't good, Debbie didn't buy the cruise because she changed her mind, instead of making up stories about it, what if we proactively connected with that customer in that moment rather than waiting for her to be an old statistic in a log file somewhere next month? That's what I'm calling for. Have you seen anything like that done?
God, no. Jesus Christ. That's like 50 years in advance, Debbie. Wow.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, I just absolutely love your thinking there. I think it's absolutely perfectly brilliant. That's just freaking good, man. I think that's your like startup idea right there.
Well, I mean, same thing I was saying about the stupid NPS thing when that hosting company was like, NPS survey, and I was like, you get a 1. I've already started moving my stuff off you. They should have known that from other things I was doing. They should have known from, I started removing domains from my account. I stopped logging into the site. There were things they could have noticed, the behavior changes. Okay, back to you.
Sorry, yeah, I want to talk about why I think that's so brilliant, right? Because I'm coming from this perspective of the web analytics, right, which is the behaviors without any of the why. And essentially what you're saying is, there needs to be a product out there that takes the what, which is the behavior, like Debbie didn't buy something, and it automatically triggers when an event happens that's bad to get at the why in real time. It's just absolutely perfect. Now you're moving into a world where you're combining the what and the why to create a full story so that the business almost in real time can move in the right direction. If anybody out there is listening to this and you have a product like this, talk to us, because I think that you've nailed it. This is what's needed right now.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I feel. I feel like that is what's needed, because I see all of these metrics, some good, some bad. And I think about that hosting company.
There's no why.
I'm giving you a 1, but hypothetically, you shouldn't have been surprised by that 1 if you had any of these what I'm calling behavior triggers. Now, we might find out later they have a name, but I'm calling them behavior triggers.
I like the name behavior trigger.
Yeah, where basically Debbie started moving domains off of her account. These domains don't point to this hosting company anymore. Debbie might not be happy. Debbie has a number of support tickets that didn't go very well. Debbie used the word cancel. Maybe we should reach out to someone who said the word cancel in a support ticket. Like, hypothetically, this company shouldn't be, by the time you're asking me NPS, it's too late. And you shouldn't be surprised by how I feel about your company, because you should have, if you had these behavior triggers, you wouldn't be so reactive later. You could be more proactive earlier.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense. I mean, it's too bad that the world of websites is just so much easier to do this stuff, because one of the challenges we have is trying to figure out how do we do this in the offline world, and how do we understand people's experiences and all of this. We can do surveys. I'm skeptical that surveys really get at exactly what you want. Qual work with focus groups, that's definitely not the way to go. So we're experimenting with some stuff on the offline world to mimic what happens on websites. If we had access, we don't have access to visitor kiosks. That would be also a really great place. So you guys in the online world are much luckier, right? You can experiment with the stuff that Debbie's talking about here. Us in the offline world of tourists, or anything involving people doing things, service-based is much more difficult. I think obviously retail is making some headway here, but it's still a slow slog.
Yeah. So Jude had a follow-up question, and it sounds like Jude is running into some trouble at work. So it sounds like, as many of the people that who tend to join my adventures here do. So Jude wrote a couple of times, and Jude says, it can be a real challenge to get people to accept your critical thinking when they think they've done it and they just want you to get on with delivery. They think they've nailed the strategy. Now they're asking you to deliver. So it sounds like some struggles at work. What's your thoughts there?
We need another. I mean, it's like Debbie and I have to do a weekly podcast together, because
I do office hours every Tuesday. You can join.
Well, the whole problem is with the question is it's an excellent question, and I don't want to give it short shrift. But how Debbie's talking about NPS scores, right? Which is too late. This sounds almost like a too late situation with some of the strategy work that needed to be done beforehand, from the analytics side. So the answer to the question is analytics has to be, or data or whoever, has to be involved at the beginning of the strategy. It's a good learning lesson for you. Now that the train is moving, you just have to go along with the train this time. But I think you learn something that next time there's a new initiative or next time there's a new campaign, you have to say, I have some questions about this, or this didn't really make sense to me. Can we think about this a different way? And then you have to go back and you have to say, okay, you know what? The next time we do this, I think that this process makes more sense because we missed X, Y, and Z this time, and results showed this. And you always lead with the results, of course, right? Like this is what we saw because we didn't approach it this way. If everything was a big success, Jude, I'm going to be real honest with you and say to you, you're not going to have a very easy time getting analytics involved from the start, because everybody's going to be like, well, everything we did worked. So
wow, what are the odds?
It's only in those moments of, this didn't work, or we needed analytics, where you can really insert yourself into the process. But that sounds like a John Tesser office hours question.
I told you office hours can be fun. You two can do it. We've got just a couple of more minutes, and I know the people in the LinkedIn chat room are a minute off, and then you've got to have your lunch. Thank you for joining us from New York. I'm going to have my dinner. And
it's going to be amazing. Wild boar something, I'm guessing. Oof.
No. First of all, they make the wild boar here in red wine, and I'm allergic to red wine, so I'm not having the wild boar. Thank you very much. Second of all, I'm on a diet, so I'm cooking for myself. So if you think I'm out there eating all of these amazing foods.
You and we can talk about diets. My doctor told me I got to be on one too, so that'll be a fun one.
Okay, we've got one more question, and then I know we're going to have to wrap up. Have you used qualitative research to capture the offline world experience, like digital ethnography, diaries, journals, in-depth interviews, bulletin boards?
Yes.
Is that something you get to do at the current job, or is that more at previous jobs?
I did it at BET. We did a digital ethnography. It was one of the best studies I've ever done. It was just absolutely incredible. I can't go into too much detail, but I loved it. We took 50 people and we diaried them with multiple different ways of expressing themselves over a week. And I just thought it was one of the most incredible experiences from a qualitative perspective. We do a lot of social listening here, which is, I do it not, you can use social listening as a vanity metric. For those who aren't familiar, I'm sorry, we're running out of time. I have 1 minute. But essentially what I do is I use people's Instagram photos to understand who they are. And I make value judgments about their identities based on the way that they perceive themselves on Instagram. Like, for instance, I'll just give you a really great insight that we got from this that I tested with somebody from Brazil. Brazilians don't really care. Like, when Brazilians are traveling, they want to show you they're doing something. It's more important than anything else. They're like, I'm doing something, like, right? It's like the action, and being in the action is so important to them. That was actually a qualitative insight that we got from some of the work. Sorry, really quick answer because I know we're out of time pretty much.
And you can hang up off the Zoom meeting whenever, and I'll do the closing remarks if you've got that.
No, I'm
going
to stay on till the end. I don't have a hard. I mean, so I just don't want to. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
this is great.
Well, thank you. We'll do it again. We'll do it again for sure. We'll come up with another topic that we can riff on. We'll schedule another one. We'll get the time zones right. I didn't, it's my fault. So then I will just give my wrap up closing stuff. But before I do the wrap up, anything you want to add, John?
No, I mean, I just want everybody to really, like Debbie said, stop with the acronyms, stop with the names of things, stop thinking formality, and start thinking critically. Start questioning if you have the right KPIs in place or whether they're legacy. Start questioning whether something's vanity, and the definition of vanity is not helping the business. Start thinking if you have something real because you know that it's helping the business and you've proven that it's helping the business. I just think we needed that little summary so that you guys understand that this is real, guys. This is real life. These are the things that move businesses. So you guys are very important from the data side. You do have the power to move the business in the right way. Just make sure you're doing it right.
Fantastic. Thank you. And as I do at the end of all of the episodes, is I spell people's names for those who haven't been watching the screen and they want to find you on LinkedIn. So Jonathan Tesser is Jonathan. Tesser is Tesser. You can find him on LinkedIn. And we also mentioned Melinda Byerly, which is Melinda, Melinda. Byerly, B as in Bravo, YE. I always have to think of it, Byerly, Byerley. She's in San Francisco, and it's a pretty uncommon name, so you'll find her. I'm, of course, Debbie Levitt. You can find me at deltacx.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn, and please do subscribe on YouTube. I do at least 2 live podcasts every week. One is on a topic like this, and then every Tuesday I do Office Hours, Ask Me Anything, where I take any question you guys have on CX and UX and your careers and your struggles. And if I don't know the answer, I find someone who does and I make it a podcast. So we've had 2 so far that came by request because I didn't know the answer. So I don't know all the answers, but I will find who does. It would be the Disney way, even though I never worked there. Quick programming note, I book everything at Italy time, but you guys had daylight savings and we didn't. So please watch time zones in the next couple of weeks for the podcasts and the live streams. They're going to be a little funky because everything's on Italy time. So tomorrow office hours is the usual 6:15 p.m. Italy time. Check your clocks. We might be on different times. Wednesday is live improv comedy at 6:30 p.m. Italy time. So that's going to be 1:30 p.m. East Coast USA. Adjust from there. We are going to be live improv commenting a really bad UX job description. So join for that. And then on Thursday, it's our third improv comedy. On Thursday at 7 p.m. Italy time, we are going to do another UX job speed dating. So I've got 4 live streams this week. Lots of fantastic free content for you guys. As always, not sponsored and nothing for me to plug other than I hope you'll visit the Delta CX website and get to know more about what I do. So Jonathan, thank you again. I can't wait to continue our LinkedIn adventures together, and we'll come up with another podcast.
This was fantastic. Thank you so much for having me, Debbie. This is the most fun I could have possibly had.
You
Thank
stop
you.
that. Thank
I'm
you.
not joking. Bye, everyone.
Bye.